You see that orange box of baking soda sitting in the back of your pantry, the one you bought for 99 cents and forgot about. Right now, in the walls of your house, something is moving. Roaches behind the refrigerator, ants tracing the baseboard, a mouse scratching above the ceiling tile in the basement. They have told you that you need a contract, a monthly visit, a $200 treatment, a man in a uniform spraying poison 3 feet from where your grandchildren eat breakfast. That 99-cent box on your shelf is a bigger part of the answer than anyone ever told you. The Amish families I spent years visiting in Lancaster County have leaned on the same plain white powder for over 100 years. Roaches, ants, silverfish, fleas, the whole house for less than $1 a month. Now, I am going to be honest with you the whole way through this video. More honest than the people selling you the $18 can, and more honest than the people on the internet promising you miracles, because the truth is more useful than the hype. The pest control industry in this country pulls in over $22 billion a year, and a great deal of that money comes from people who already own most of what they need to keep the ordinary pests out themselves. The first time I sat at a kitchen table near Intercourse, Pennsylvania, watching an Amish grandmother mix a couple of plain ingredients in a chipped saucer, I understood why I had handed over more than $11,000 to exterminators across 30 years for problems that her family handled out of the pantry. Watch this video to the end. The final technique I am going to show you connects to a USDA Wildlife Services document dated October 9, 2008. The Amish were already using the principle behind it 4 generations before the government ever wrote it down, and almost no homeowner in America knows about it. This is not for people building a new house. This is for you right now in the house you already own with the box you already have. But first, I have to tell you the single most important thing in this entire video, the thing that separates this channel from every overhyped pest video you have ever scrolled past. Baking soda is not a magic poison. Anyone who tells you it makes roaches and mice explode from gas because they cannot burp is repeating a story from the internet that does not hold up, and I am not going to insult you with it. What baking soda actually is a desiccant and a disruptor. It absorbs moisture, it absorbs odor. It is mildly abrasive to the waxy coating and the joints of small insects, which dries them out over time. And it wipes out the invisible chemical scent trails that ants and roaches use to navigate your house. That is what it really does. It is not an instant exterminator. It is a cheap, non-toxic deterrent and drying agent that, used patiently and in the right places, takes away the 3 things pests need most: moisture, odor, cover, and their scent highways. Understand it that way, and it works. Expect it to be a magic powder that kills everything overnight, and you will be disappointed the same way you have been disappointed by everything else. So let me show you how the Amish actually use it. Start with roaches, because this is the one that changed my mind. You know the scene. You walk into your own kitchen at 2 in the morning for a glass of water. You flip the light on, and the floor moves as a dozen of them pour back under the stove and into the cracks. You spray. For a few days it seems better. Then they come back, and the ones that come back seem tougher than the ones before. You spray again, you call somebody, he sprays, they come back. That cycle is exactly the cycle the industry is built on, and it is the cycle the Amish never got onto in the first place. Here is the Amish approach, and here is why it works, where a quick spray does not. You take equal parts plain white sugar and plain baking soda, a tablespoon of each is plenty for a small area, and you mix them together in a shallow dish or an old jar lid, which is exactly what I saw used at a kitchen table in Holmes County, Ohio, back in the spring of 2019. You place that dish in the corners where roaches actually travel and shelter, behind the refrigerator, under the sink, along the back edge of the stove, inside the cabinet where the trash can sits, in the warm, dark gap beside the dishwasher. The sugar is the draw. Roaches are pulled to it and cannot leave it alone. The baking soda, taken in along with the sugar over repeated visits, works against them slowly, drying them and disagreeing with their systems, and over time, the population thins out. But I want to be straight with you about the timeline, because the internet lies about this, and then you blame the powder when the lie does not come true. This is not an overnight kill. There is no overnight kill that lasts. This works over days and into weeks, as the bait keeps drawing them in and the conditions in the room keep turning against them. And here is the part almost everyone skips, the part the Amish grandmother said 3 times so I would not forget it. You have to do 3 things together, not one of them, all 3. First, bait. Second, refresh that bait every 3 days, because the moment it goes stale or damp, the roaches walk right past it as if it were not there. Third, and this is the one nobody does, take away their water. A roach can live a month without food, but only about a week without water. So the water is the lever. You fix the faucet that drips under the sink. You wipe the sink bone dry before bed. You do not leave the dog's water bowl sitting out on the floor all night. You empty the drip tray under the fridge. Bait, refresh, dehydrate, all 3 at once. Do that, and a roach problem that has dragged on for years winds down over a few weeks instead of flaring up forever. I watched a kitchen in a 130-year-old farmhouse outside Berlin, Ohio, that had never once seen a can of Raid, and it was spotless. No roaches, no flies, no ants, on nothing more than a small dish of powder behind the wood stove, and a family that simply never left water or food sitting out overnight. That dish cost them about 3 cents to make. The exterminator, who would have charged $85 a visit, drove right past their lane every month on his way into town. Now, here is some history that surprised me, because it tells you this is not a fad somebody invented for the internet. In 1846, 2 bakers in New York named John, Dwight, and Austin Church began packaging sodium bicarbonate in small cardboard boxes for American households. Within a couple of decades, housewives across the country had found dozens of other uses for it, and the company began printing little household hint pamphlets. There are pamphlets from the late 1800s that already describe dusting baking soda and powdered sugar along baseboards against cockroaches. The exact same idea that gets presented as a brand new discovery on social media today was printed in a free pamphlet handed out at general stores well over a century ago, and the principle goes back much further than that. The ancient Egyptians used a natural mineral called natron, a mix of sodium bicarbonate and sodium carbonate, to clean, to preserve, and to keep insects out of stored grain. People have understood for thousands of years that this simple mineral discourages pests without poisoning the people handling the food. The Amish did not invent it either. They just never threw it away. Ants are next, and ants are not roaches. They do not eat the same way, they do not digest the same way, and if you just sprinkle powder on the floor and hope for the best, you will be disappointed and you will decide the whole thing is nonsense. The Amish figured the ant problem out a long time ago, and the formula is 50-50 baking soda and powdered sugar. The fine confectioner's kind you dust on donuts, not the granulated kind you used for the roaches. The reason is purely mechanical, and it is genuinely clever once you see it. Granulated sugar has crystals big enough that an ant can pick the sugar grains out and carry only the sugar back to the colony, leaving the soda behind. Powdered sugar is ground so fine that the 2 ingredients blend into a single powder the ant cannot separate. It cannot tell them apart. So it picks up both, carries both home, and shares both with the nest, where the food gets passed mouth to mouth through the colony, all the way to the larvae and the queen. You take a plastic cap off a soda bottle, fill it with the 50-50 mixture, and set those caps right at the entry points, the crack under the back door, the gap behind the dishwasher, the windowsill where you have watched the trail come and go. If you can actually see a live trail moving, lay a thin line of the powder straight across their path. They will be feeding within minutes. And this is the key that separates it from spraying the ones you see. The ants do not drop dead on your counter. They carry the bait home first. The colony thins from the inside over the next week to 10 days, which is the only way to deal with ants that does not just leave the nest intact to send out a fresh wave next week. And there is a second ant technique I learned from a man named Jonas who farms outside New Holland, Pennsylvania, and this is the part of the whole ant method with the most solid, undisputed science behind it, so pay attention to this one. If you already have a heavy trail running through the house, dissolve 2 tablespoons of baking soda in a quart of hot water, soak a clean rag in it, and wipe down every single surface the ants have been crossing: the counter, the baseboard, the windowsill, the floor along the wall. Here is why that works and why it is not folklore at all. Ants do not navigate by sight. They navigate almost entirely by following the chemical pheromone scent that the ants ahead of them laid down, an invisible road painted in chemistry. When you wash that scent away with the baking soda water, the road simply vanishes. The next ant that comes out of the nest reaches the end of the scent, finds nothing, gets confused, and turns back. Pair the bait caps with the trail wipe down and you break an ant invasion at both ends, the colony thinning from the bait and the navigation collapsing from the wipe down, and the wipe down is the genuinely reliable, science-backed half of it that works every time. Mice are the pest that frightens people the most, and here I have to be especially honest with you because this is where the internet is most reckless. You will see videos claiming a peanut butter and baking soda ball makes a mouse explode internally. I am not going to tell you that because it is not reliable, and I am not going to send you to bed thinking a problem is solved when it is not. What baking soda genuinely does with mice is far more modest. It helps with the smell, it helps dry out the droppings and the damp spots they are drawn to, and it can make an area less attractive to them. But if you have mice actively in your walls, the honest answer is the boring one that actually works, the one the old farmers used alongside everything else. You take away their food and water, you seal their entry points, and you set traps. The Amish farmhouses I visited that had no mice did not have a magic powder doing it. They had tight grain bins, sealed gaps, a cat, and a habit of never leaving food out. I would rather tell you the dull truth than a thrilling lie, because the thrilling lie is how you end up with mice in your wall and a false sense that you handled it. And mice are a real health matter, not just a nuisance. Public health agencies document that mouse droppings and urine can carry salmonella and other diseases onto food surfaces. So if you have an active infestation, signs of disease, or anyone vulnerable in the house, that is a time to bring in help, and there is no shame in it. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people who can rebuild a kitchen from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you, and it is the part I most wish someone had explained to me 20 years and $11,000 ago. Most homes in America were built before 1980, and most of those homes have dozens of small entry points that the original builders never bothered to seal. Gaps you can find in an afternoon with a flashlight if you crouch down low where the pests actually travel. The Amish habit for an existing home is to treat the perimeter, and I want to be completely honest about what baking soda does and does not do in that job, because this is exactly where the internet oversells it into uselessness. You go around the foundation, inside and out, and you find every crack, every gap around a pipe, every place the siding meets the foundation, every spot where a wire or a vent passes through. Now, the real sealing, the part that physically keeps a pest out, is done with caulk or with copper mesh packed into the gap. I will not pretend a line of powder is a locked door, because it is not, and anybody who tells you baking soda alone seals a house is lying to you. What the baking soda actually adds, worked into those same cracks alongside the real sealing, is a desiccant line, a drying barrier that helps dry out and discourage the small crawling insects, the ants, the silverfish, the earwigs that try to use those roots, and it scrubs out the scent trails they lay down to find their way back. So you do both. You seal the gap properly, and you work a little dry baking soda into the seam. Inside the house, you run the same thin line along the inside edges of the cabinets, under the kick plate of the kitchen sink, along the back edge of every closet floor, and around any pipe that comes up through the floor or out through a wall. One single 1-pound box treats the entire perimeter of an average American home, inside and out, and you simply refresh it a couple of times a year when you think of it. The total annual cost of keeping that desiccant line around your whole house is a couple of dollars. It is a genuine, real help. It is not a force field, and the moment you expect it to be a force field is the moment it lets you down, so keep your expectations honest and it will quietly earn its keep year after year. There are a handful of other common pests this powder genuinely helps with, and I am going to give them to you the honest way with the realistic version of what each one actually does, not the marketing version. Silverfish first, those fast silver gray bugs you find in bathrooms and basements and around old books and cardboard. Silverfish are fundamentally a moisture pest. They live and breed in damp, and they cannot survive in dry conditions. Dry baking soda sprinkled along the edges of the tub, behind the toilet, under the sinks, and in the damp back corners of the basement works mainly by pulling the moisture out of those little micro-environments, and it is that drying, far more than any poison effect, that drives the silverfish out when you repeat it every few days for a couple of weeks. The honest full fix is also a dehumidifier and actually addressing the source of the damp, and the baking soda is a cheap, helpful partner alongside that, not a substitute for it. Next, phorid flies, those tiny dark flies you see hovering around floor drains and the drain behind the washing machine. They breed in the slimy film that builds up inside the drain pipe, so you pour 2 tablespoons of baking soda straight down the drain, dry, no water, and let it sit overnight. In the morning, you flush it with a full kettle of boiling water. The baking soda and the boiling water together break up and flush out the slime layer where the flies lay their eggs, and if you do this once a month, you keep the drain clean enough that they simply have nowhere to breed. That one genuinely works, and the reason it works is that it attacks the breeding site instead of chasing the adult flies around the room. Next, grain weevils and rice weevils in the pantry, the little dark beetles that turn up in flour and rice and cornmeal and dry pasta. These are really a moisture and sanitation problem at heart. Wiping the shelves down with baking soda and hot water, letting them dry completely, and keeping an open dish of soda on the shelf to pull moisture and odor out of the air makes the pantry a poor place for weevil eggs to develop. But I have to be honest that the truly essential step, the one that actually ends it, is throwing out the infested package entirely and storing your dry goods from then on in sealed glass or metal containers the beetles cannot get into. The soda supports that. It does not replace it. Then there are fleas. And fleas are the one where I have to be most careful with you, because this is where the marketing oversells baking soda the hardest, and where I have watched people get let down. If you have a dog or a cat, sprinkling baking soda into the carpets and the pet bedding, brushing it down into the fibers, leaving it several hours or overnight, and then vacuuming thoroughly does genuinely help dry out and lift some of the eggs and larvae buried deep in the carpet when you repeat it weekly. And it is far gentler than blanketing the floors your grandchildren crawl on with chemical flea powder. But a real established flea infestation almost always also needs the pet itself treated with a proper veterinary product and all the bedding washed in hot water, and in that fight the baking soda is the supporting player, not the hero. And finally, slugs out in the garden, where a thin line of baking soda sprinkled around the base of a plant does dry out and deter them on contact, with the honest catch that you have to reapply after every single rain because it washes straight away. And frankly, a simple ring of crushed eggshell or a shallow dish of beer often does the very same job with less fuss. This is the right moment for the most important caveat in the whole video, and unlike most people in my position, I am going to put it front and center instead of hiding it because I respect you. Baking soda is not a miracle, and it will not solve every pest problem. If you have structural termites eating the beams of your house, you need a professional, full stop. If you have a serious rat colony in the attic, you need traps, exclusion work, and possibly a wildlife specialist. If you live where there are venomous spiders or disease-carrying insects, you need real, targeted strategies, not a box of bicarbonate. I am not telling you to ignore a serious problem or to skip a doctor or a professional when one is warranted. I am telling you that the ordinary, everyday pests that send most people running to the hardware store or reaching for the phone can usually be discouraged and managed with patience and a few cents of pantry powder, and that you have been frightened into paying far more than that for far too long. So before I give you that last technique, the one connected to the USDA document, here is where everything I have gathered from these Amish kitchens lives in one place. Every recipe, every measurement, every method from this channel is collected together in the description below in something called the Amish Home System. Now stay with me, because this final method is the one that ties the whole thing together, and it is the one I most want you to understand correctly rather than dangerously. In October of 2008, the USDA Wildlife Service's National Wildlife Research Center released a document about controlling invasive coqui frogs in Hawaii using sodium bicarbonate. It is a real document. You can find it. They tested several grades of baking soda and found that the finest pharmaceutical grade was both the most effective and the cheapest. And at heavy outdoor application rates, they got high mortality of the target pest within a day. Now, I have to stop and be careful and honest with you right here, because this is precisely the kind of real fact that gets ripped out of context and turned into a lie on the internet. That study was about frogs outdoors, applied at agricultural rates of hundreds of pounds per acre across open ground. You cannot read it as proof that baking soda is some powerful indoor bug killer, and I am not going to stand here and pretend that it does, because the second I exaggerate one thing, you have every right to doubt everything else I have told you, and everything else I have told you is true. What that document does confirm, in a peer-reviewed government setting, is the underlying principle that the Amish understood by feel and by tradition 100 years before anyone in Washington wrote it down, which is that very fine baking soda settled down into the cracks and crevices where insects actually travel is a genuine desiccant that works against them steadily over time by drying them out. That principle is sound. And the Amish way of getting that fine powder deep into the cracks where it does its work is the technique I want to hand you now, with one firm safety rule wrapped around it that I am not going to let you skip. You use a hand duster, the little squeeze bulb kind, or a simple squeeze bottle, or the old powder bellows your grandmother might have kept. You load it with fine baking soda, and you puff a thin, light film of it directly into the cracks and crevices, into the gap behind the kick plate of the sink, into the dead space behind an outlet cover with the breaker switched off first, into the back corners of cabinets and the seams under the appliances, all the hidden runways a brush or a rag could never reach. A thin film down in the cracks where the insects crawl and where you never go. Now here is the firm rule, and I mean every word of it, because this is where the internet version of this trick gets genuinely dangerous. You do not ever create a cloud of this powder in the open air of a room and then walk into it. Fine powder hanging in the air is not something you want in your lungs, no different from breathing flour dust or sawdust in a workshop. So you apply it gently and low into the cracks. In a room with a window open, you let it settle out of the air, and you never stand in a fog of it. Done that way, gently and into the runways, that thin film of desiccant sits in the hidden paths for months, and any insect that travels those paths is crossing a drying agent the entire time, working slowly and steadily and non-toxically in the places you cannot otherwise treat. The Amish used exactly this in old farmhouses, root cellars, smokehouses, and chicken coops for generations, and they did it the careful way, into the cracks, not as a stunt and not as a cloud. A $5 box of fine baking soda, applied gently and patiently like that, is one of the cheapest forms of steady, ongoing pressure you can keep on the ordinary insects in a house, and it is non-toxic to the people and the animals who actually live there, which, when you get right down to it, is the entire reason to bother with any of this. And let me give you the reason the non-toxic part matters so much, because this is the real argument, the honest one, the one that does not need a single exaggeration to land hard. The cans of bug spray lined up on the hardware store shelf with their cheerful cartoon mascots and their promises of a pest-free home are not harmless. Peer-reviewed research has linked heavy household exposure to the common pyrethroid pesticides, which are the active ingredients in most household bug sprays, with measurable effects in children at the highest exposure levels. Other published work has raised real concerns about pets living in homes treated regularly with certain chemical pest products. These are not fringe internet claims, they are findings published in respected, peer-reviewed journals, and you can look every one of them up for yourself, which is more than the people selling you the spray will ever invite you to do. And yet the cans still sit on the shelf at eye level in every hardware store in the country, friendly and bright, 3 feet from the register. Baking soda carries none of that risk, and that is not a small thing, it is the whole thing. It is so safe, it is an approved food additive that goes into the food you already eat. It is so safe that bakers feed it to their own children in every batch of cookies and biscuits. It is so safe that doctors use it on people. Now, I have told you plainly and more than once in this video that it will not match a strong chemical for raw, immediate killing power, and I stand by that honesty, because you deserve it. But for the everyday, ordinary pests, in the rooms where your grandchildren sleep on the floor and your dog eats out of a bowl and your family prepares its food, a cheap, non-toxic deterrent and drying agent that you control completely, that you can apply yourself, that costs under $1 and that you never have to worry about a child or an animal getting into is worth a tremendous amount. That is exactly the trade the Amish made more than 100 years ago, weighing a little more patience against a lot less poison in the home, and it is a trade they have never once regretted, and neither will you. I want to tell you about a woman named Margaret. She lived in rural Tennessee and passed away a few years ago at 96. Her granddaughter wrote to me after one of my earlier videos and shared something Margaret used to say: when you stop trusting yourself to solve your own problems, somebody else will start charging you to solve them. Margaret raised 7 children in a small farmhouse through the Depression and after, and she never once called an exterminator. She kept a tin of baking soda on the shelf above her wood stove and used it for everything: scrubbing, brushing teeth, settling stomachs, and keeping the ants out of the sugar barrel and the weevils out of the cornmeal. When she died, her granddaughter found that same tin, still half full, in the same spot it had sat for 60 years. That is not magic. That is a woman who understood her own house, did the small things consistently, and never paid for fear. That is the whole lesson. You bought a box of baking soda once, and you forgot it existed. Today you learned the honest truth about it, which is better than the hype, because the honest truth you can actually rely on. It is not a miracle, and it will not replace a professional for a serious infestation. But for the ordinary roaches and ants and silverfish and the damp drains and the pantry beetles that have been sending you to the store and the phone for years, that 99-cent box, used patiently and placed correctly, does real work, costs almost nothing, and never poisons your family. They sold you fear and they sold you dependency, and they counted on you never asking the simple question, what did people do before all of this existed? They did the small things with cheap things consistently the way the Amish still do. If you believe that some practical knowledge has been quietly pushed aside because there was no profit in it, you already know what to do next. I want you to do one thing before you go. Scroll down and tell me which technique you are going to try first. The sugar and soda dish for the roaches behind the stove. The pheromone trail wipe down for the ants. The drain treatment for the flies. Tell me, because I read every comment, and if you have your own family recipe, something your mother or grandfather used, share it, because other people watching need to read it. Subscribe if you want to keep pulling this kind of knowledge back into the light, not to support me, but to join the people who are tired of paying for things they do not need and being told they are not capable of handling their own homes. Next week, I am going to show you what the Amish do with plain white vinegar that replaces a shelf full of cleaning products, and one use nobody would ever guess, involving a glass jar, a piece of copper wire, and something you throw in the trash every morning. The box is on your shelf. The cost is under $1. The honest knowledge is now yours, and nobody can take it back. I will see you in the next one.